What is going on, guys? Gaston right here, and today we're going to be talking about a brand new firmware update that is coming from the Sony A7S III, and also we're going to be talking about all the latest leaks and features of the Sony FX3, the new cinema camera from Sony. All that information coming right up. And welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're talking about the Sony A7S III new firmware update that is coming out, and also we're going to talk about the Sony FX3. Before we continue, let me remind you that I'm giving away here in the channel a brand new Xeon Crane 2S, and all you have to do to enter is simply read the rules right next to me. I'll be listing all the rules also down in the description. The announcement is going to happen April 5th. Good luck to all of you guys. All right, let's start with the first one. Should I talk first about the S3 or the FX3? Let me see. Let's actually go with the Sony A7S III because this one is very short. So this camera has a leaked firmware update that Sony is about to release, and this was actually confirmed by Sony Nordic that apparently they actually made a little mistake and released that newsletter too early. Now, we got a copy right here that you can see thanks to Andrea and Sony Alpha Rumor for reporting on this one, but you can see clearly that R2 links right there for Mac and PC, so you can download the firmware, right? Now, what this firmware is going to do is going to allow the Sony A7S III to have the S Cinetone picture profile as well, and also brings active image stabilization in SNQ. Now let's talk about the first one, S Cinetone for the Sony A7S III. You know, a lot of you guys have been asking for this, especially now that the Sony FX6 has it and the Sony FX9 has it. You know, it is a picture profile that looks really good straight out of the camera, and you know, has that cinematic look, and that's one of the reasons why people like it. Now, in my opinion, you know, this is for the first time, you know, that we have a mirrorless body with usable SLO3 10-bit 422. And now that we have this, people are asking for S Cinetone. In my opinion, ITU 709 with the ITU 709 Matrix is a better straight out of camera picture profile in my opinion. It has great dynamic range, it does great in low light, very little noise, and it also allows you to pull and, you know, stretch your colors, you know, pretty good without falling apart. So, but again, that's me. Now, I don't know how many people having the SLO3 capabilities are gonna wanna bake in picture profiles, you know, in their footage and kind of like risking not being able to manipulate them so much. But hey, us photographers and videographers were never happy. We always want more. Now let's talk about the second one, because it's the image stabilization, the active image stabilization in SNQ. Now, this is something that a lot of, you know, users complained before, not having active image stabilization. But there's going to be a caveat right here, because the active image stabilization is only going to be enabled for anything under 100 frames per second. So 100 is not going to be an option, 120 is not going to be an option, 240 not even an option. But in my opinion, it's not a big deal, because, you know, you in 120, you know, unless you're doing something really crazy, you don't really notice, you know, the shakiness at 120 frames per second. But that's gonna be it for the Sony A7S III new firmware update on its way, and probably they're gonna drop in similar time as the Sony FX3 is going to be announced, which is gonna be the next announcement or camera that I'm gonna be talking about. So I was the first one in the entire internet to actually drop the first pictures and confirm the specs, thanks to my source somewhere in the other part of the world. So I just want to sum it up, because I've been getting so many questions. If you have seen one of my videos, it's loaded with a bunch of questions from you guys. So I'm going to put together everything that I gather about this camera, that, by the way, it is said that it's going to be announced on February 23rd, but we're going to talk about that because that date may actually change. So the Sony FX3 is going to be the next cinema camera that Sony is going to be releasing. Now, this one is going to be super tiny because it's going to sport a similar body as the Sony A7Siii. Now, this camera is going to be, in terms of features, very similar to the Sony A7S III. So we're going to have the same 12 megapixel sensor backside illuminated that the Sony A7S III uses. We are also going to have, for the first time in a cinema camera, still capabilities, and this makes a lot of sense. We're going to talk that in just a moment. We also going to have the same codecs that the Sony A7S III has. We're going to have the same dual CF Express Type A base for the media, just like the Sony A7S III, and the list goes on. So anything that you know that the Sony A7S III has, this camera is going to have it, but it's going to have some things extra and some things that the Sony A7S III has. Now, the first obvious thing that we're not going to have in this camera that the Sony A7S III has is the beautiful EVF. The 9.64 million dots EVF is not going to be present in this camera. Now, I think that that's a bummer to remove an EVF from a cinema camera, but the FX6 doesn't have one and it's way more expensive. Now, the other thing that we're not going to have, and I think is a missed opportunity, is the ND filter. So this camera is not going to have variable ND filters or pop-in ND filters like some of the other cinema cameras from Sony, such as the FX6 and FX9. And one of the reasons why is because A, the body of the camera is actually very, very small for the variable ND filter, and B, we have image stabilization, you know, and we've seen this in the Sony FX6 and FX9. They don't have sensor image stabilization, and the FX6 doesn't even have digital image stabilization, which that's a shame, but that's for another time. So because of that, you know, Sony has opted for adding the in-body image stabilization, which in my opinion doesn't make a lot of sense because this one is obviously a camera designed for gimbals, and more specifically for the new AirPeak drone that Sony has coming up. As you can see, the camera has some mounting options on the top of the camera. I'm assuming that this camera is also going to allow connectivity to the drone directly from the hot shoe mount. So if this is a camera that was designed for, you know, mainly gimbals and drones, why even put image stabilization? I would much rather have ND filters of some sort than having image stabilization as, you know, a feature. But it is what it is. Now, let's talk about the price, because this is something that I think that have changed my mind. Now, there has been a leak, and this one didn't come from me, but it's saying that the camera was going to be in Euro 37.95, 3,795 euros, which it actually translates to 4,600 American dollars. But I don't think that is actually the case, and I have two theories right here. Sony can go the more expensive route, or Sony can go the least expensive route. So let me tell you why Sony may actually price the camera more expensive than the Sony A7S III. Well, there's one reason. It's actually very simple, because this one bears the cinema line, you know, writing on the camera, to be honest with you guys. I think the Sony is gonna opt for going in a cheaper route in this camera, and probably I want to believe that the first rumor of 3,795 euros was wrong, because I believe that this camera is going to be around $3,000 up to $3,200. And the sole reason is because this camera is not going to have that awesome EVF that the Sony A7S III has. If that's the case, I think that Sony may have a winner right here, because having a cinema camera that is very portable is something that Sony doesn't have right now. It is going to be the same features of the Sony A7S III in a small body, and that's gonna be it for today, guys. What do you think about the Sony FX3? Are you excited about the features? I know that a lot of you guys want the NDs. Drop your comments down below. Let me know how do you feel about this one, and let me know if you really are waiting for S Cinetone for the Sony A7S III. Is that something that you will really use? Let me know in the comments, and as always, guys, subscribe to this channel for more content like this one. I will see you in the next video.